if you take the best lifestyle and you combine it with the best of modern medicine, then you're talking about a really nicely long, healthy life.
Have you heard about the world's blue zones? We're going to talk about how they got that name and what they are and all of that. But in a nutshell, as I understand it, a blue zone is a region of the world where people live significantly longer, and also they are much healthier than the rest of us around, so to speak. Now, we could talk about all of the reasons why we are hurting ourselves by eating too much and not exercising enough and all of that. But today, in this podcast, I want to get into what are the commonalities that bring these people who live in blue zones to such a much healthier way of living and a much longer life than perhaps I would share, or you would share, or Steve would share. Who are you, sir?
So I'm Steve Austad. I'm a distinguished professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and I'm also the Protective Life Endowed Chair in Healthy Aging Research, and I have been studying aging and longevity for about 35 years.
That's a long time, and we're going to get into it. And I'm Pam Huff. I hate the word, but I'm a retired journalist with about 50 years experience in that way. I love to ask questions. I have a curious mind. I study a lot and I read a lot. And I have a feeling if you are listening to this podcast, you probably do a lot of those things as well. So we don't want to waste your time. We want to get right into these blue zones. Steve, did I give a decent description of what a blue zone is?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just visited, as I understand it, there are 5 blue zones that are actually identified in the world. You just visited another one that is sort of in the running to become the 6th one.
Right, yes. So I visited it for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to see firsthand some of the blue zones, because I've been involved in this. When Dan Buettner was working on his first book where he described the blue zones, he actually called me out of the blue. I'd never heard of him. I talked to him for about 2 hours, and
that first conversation.
Yeah, and I had no idea it was going to turn into a book. So when the book came out, I was very interested. So I followed this for ever since. But I've always been a little bit skeptical. And in fact, I told him, Dan, I'm a little bit skeptical about these. He said, well, come along with me. Let's go visit a place, and you'll see how we validate these things.
And we should say, for those of you who don't know, Dan Buettner is with National Geographic. He travels with his film crews, so everything is documented. And he's written more than one book.
Right now, he's written a number of cookbooks. Dietary advice from the blue zones.
Because, isn't that fascinating? We're going to hear about what these folks eat in a little while as well. All right, so the place you visited was in the mountainous region of Sardinia, and they already have one blue zone there. That was the very first one.
Right, and that's still the best documented one. In the year 2000, I was actually at a meeting in Montpellier in France, and this person was describing this blue zone. And I was sitting in the audience thinking, this is such nonsense. Who does he think he's going to believe?
Skeptical?
Yeah, well, that's the way scientists are. Scientists are skeptics by training and by temperament.
Sure.
And one of the reasons I think that I got invited to go along on this trip is that Dan had written something that I'd written that was critical of the very concept of blue zones. And so he wanted to show me. And now I'm a complete convert. Now that I've actually seen one, I'm a believer that they exist. But I'm also a believer that they may come and go. In other words, the world is not static. It's changing all the time. So a place that might have had the best traditional lifestyles for healthy longevity may change. They may get westernized. New traditions and cultures may move in. Lots of things happen. And we know that some of the previously described blue zones are either shrinking or maybe even disappearing.
Well, now let's talk about where they are right now. We have the first one, and you said the most well-documented one, which is in Sardinia. There is also one in Okinawa. There's another one in Costa Rica.
Right.
There's one in Loma Linda, California.
Well, that one's a little bit dicey. The Loma Linda, Californians. So the people that have the exceptional longevity and the exceptional health there are Seventh-day Adventists. Mm-hmm. There's a big collection of them in Loma Linda, California. Oh. But actually, some of them in that study also live elsewhere. Oh, so that's one of the lesser solid geographic areas for blue zones. The other one is in Icaria, Greece. Which, if you think about it now, Sardinia is an island off the west coast of Italy. Icaria is an island in the Aegean Sea. Okinawa is an island. One of the things that these blue zones seem to have is they seem to have some degree of isolation. Yeah. And you can tell that they're isolated because all these places basically have their own language or their own dialect. One of the things I didn't realize, fortunately on this journey, we had a Sardinian with us, is that the older people don't speak Italian. They speak Sardinian. I didn't even know there was such a thing. This is a Sardinian language.
Okay.
And I constantly had to ask our guide, I said, did you talk to this person in Italian or Sardinian? And if it was an older person, she'd say, no, they don't understand Italian.
Well, but they do understand what they do and what has worked for them. Now, I'm curious to see what you discovered in the one that is being looked at right now versus the one that has been confirmed as a blue zone in Sardinia. Diet, huge. Exercise, huge. Laughter, huge. Are you still finding in this other mountainous region, which isn't that far away? You told me earlier, before we started this, about 30 or 40 miles away, another village. Are you finding the same commonalities?
There seem to be.
Yeah.
And I was really impressed. First of all, this village is on the side of a mountain, so even going from one part of the village to the other part of the village, you do a lot of work.
Okay.
But also with the social cohesion. So we had a meal with a big family there, and they invited their relatives over, and we had 4 generations.
Aren't they all relatives at that point?
They are pretty much all relatives. Yeah. But this was like one of these, like a scene out of a Woody Allen movie, where there's a big family and everybody's talking and yelling across the table. And the food, we had them cook a traditional meal for us. And it was pretty much everything coming out of their garden or from livestock that they own. They don't eat much meat. They said when they were growing up, maybe once a week.
Wow.
They would eat meat. But there were so many different kinds of vegetables that I didn't know a lot of the vegetables that we're eating. They all came out of their garden. But I was more struck than anything, I think, by the social cohesion. Like, we were there during a festival. And this was a pageant. It was a religious pageant. And there were people dressed up in horses and people carrying icons and marching up and down the street. And what impressed me was there are a lot of the teenage kids from the village who were there watching it and participating in it. I think of teenagers in this country doing some official thing like this. If you had to drag them, you might be able to drag them. They would be bored to death. Yes. Not at all involved. But there, it's just part of the fabric of their social existence. Yeah. And it's very different from my experience. I'm an only child. My wife is an only child. We're not used to these big family gatherings. But when I watched that, I thought, this is really interesting. And
there was laughter, and there was plenty of talk.
Oh, yeah.
And dance, I bet.
Yeah, laughter, talk. 4 generations, the great-granddaughter and the great-grandmother were talking to one another. The great-granddaughter is learning how to cook from the great-grand. It was a fabulous experience, I have to say.
How much did they eat? And I have a question, a reason I'm asking that question. Did they eat a lot?
Well, it's hard to say because they made a lot of food for us.
Okay.
But I can say this, I didn't see a single obese person in the village. So whatever they eat, they're burning it up in the calories that they use.
I've got to do this. Dan Buettner, who we talked about earlier, I read this about him and I thought, wow, could we all benefit from this? He says that the folks in Okinawa, in the blue zone in Okinawa, begin each meal, and I hope I say this correctly, by saying hara hachibu, which is a reminder to stop eating when your stomach is 80% full. Have you been to a restaurant in this country and they give you like this much food, you know, and nobody says Hari Hachi Boo because you just keep piling it in? And that is something that we have to think about changing, isn't it?
Yeah, and if we do need to think about changing that. And in fact, if you go to other parts of the world, one of the first things you notice if you go out to a restaurant is the portions are so much smaller. Than they are here. They're plenty for people, but they're so much smaller. And you know, eating too much is at the base of a lot of health problems that we have.
So these folks have eat less, and they eat plant-based food and a lot less meat. That's just a part of what they do. But I want to talk more about their physical activity, because one of the reasons that you have these blue zones, you see a lot of men living to be 100 plus, a lot of women living to be 100 plus. And obviously, as you said earlier, it would be really great to have men and women both living to that age. It would solve a whole lot of issues probably. But they don't just live, they're active. They walk these mountains. Is that something that they do because they started it at such a young age? Or could they also benefit from, you know, if they hadn't done that, for example, an American who has not walked in 30 years, could they benefit by doing that as well?
Well, there's an interesting case from the Costa Rican Blue Zone, where the Costa Rican Blue Zone, which is in an area called the Nicoya Peninsula, the demographer who started studying them looked at two kinds of people that lived there. People that were born there and lived there their whole lives, and people that immigrated from some other part of Costa Rica. The longest lived people were the people that had lived there their entire lives. But even the people who had moved there in their 50s were living longer than people in the rest of Costa Rica. So there's clearly something about the lifestyle that changed. Now, in Sardinia, where I was, virtually everybody was born and had lived there their whole life, so it was hard to say. But I also think this is one of the reasons, one of the things that's unique about the Sardinian Blue Zone is that the men are living as long as the women. Usually by the time you reach the age of 100, there are 3-4 women for every man that's still alive. There, it's 1-to-1.
Wow.
And I'm thinking that it may be because the men spend a lot of them are shepherds. They spend their entire life walking because their flocks are at the top of a mountain. Their herds are at the top of a mountain. We talked to a guy who told us when he was younger, he walked 20 to 25 miles a day to get to the place where he worked. And
my goodness.
And so then you can imagine the amount of physical activity. But I was struck by the fact that, so we interviewed two sisters. One of them was 100, one of them was 98. They'd lived together their entire lives. Neither one of them had gotten married. But they were so active, they would start telling us something about what happened earlier in life and say, oh, let me show you. And they'd jump up and they'd run into a different room and come back with some things to show you. And first of all, I couldn't believe they were that age. And secondly, they were also mentally extremely sharp.
Really?
Yeah.
And 98 and 100.
98 and 100.
Wow. Probably before we go any more into this, we need to explain where the name Blue Zone came from. Can you walk me through that?
Sure. So the first blue zone that was discovered in Sardinia, these villages were marked on a map with a blue marker. And so it became easy for them to remember, oh yes, we'll call it the blue zone because that's we marked it in blue. So now it's in common usage, right?
Very good.
But the other thing that's evolving is how you define it. Usually people will say it's when you have an exceptional number of people that live into their 90s or 100s. It's not that these are where the oldest people in the world live, necessarily. The oldest people in the world, many of them are from Japan. I don't think any of them are actually from Okinawa. But there's an enormous number of people live to 100 in Okinawa, 7 times as many as in the rest of Japan.
Jeez.
And Japan already has more 100-year-olds than any other country. So right now we're actually trying to figure out some very clean and rigorous ways to define blue zones, because everybody has done it a little bit differently in the past. If we're going to call these things blue zones, let's say this is what you have to do. Right?
In fact, I was reading, doing research for this podcast, and it said that they are considering another blue zone right now, but this would be what they call Blue Zone 2.0. And it would be Singapore, because not that the people are doing everything right, but that the government has stepped in and said, we are going to help our people do this right to increase their longevity.
Yes, and that's a very nice model for the rest of the world, I would say.
Yeah.
Because they've manufactured a blue zone by creating the right environment. And one of the things that Dan Buettner said to me again and again and again is, you don't change people's behavior by telling them you have to change your behavior. Mm-hmm. You do it by changing the environment so that there changes their behavior naturally. And I think that's a very good way of thinking about it. And this is why blue zones come and go. This one is new and it's manufactured. There are others that seem to be disappearing. You know, Okinawa, after World War II, there's this enormous American presence there.
Sure.
Now. There's lots of fast food restaurants that they never used to have. So the younger people are not actually surviving as well as the older people.
So that tells us, teaches us a lot of lessons. We're hurting ourselves by maybe not following the modern way of doing things, but going back to the way it used to be. I just found, and you may or may not agree with me on these, but I found the 9 commonalities among the people who live in these so-called blue zones now. And if we could just kind of walk down through them and say something as you want to. The first is that these folks move naturally. They don't spend 18 hours a day in the gym, but they're out there doing natural movements, and that's good for them. Like you said, these sisters jumped up and ran into another room and came back.
Yeah, so this is quite interesting. We interviewed a doctor from this village.
Oh, okay.
And we say, what do you notice? And what she said is, the younger people are the ones that come to see me with injuries. She was a rehabilitation doctor, because they go to the gym and they hurt themselves and all. The older people didn't do that. They walked up the mountains.
25 miles, yeah.
Yeah. So there's something to be said for just moving.
Just moving.
Yeah.
Keep moving. So move naturally. Have a purpose. Why do I wake up in the morning? And the purpose for these people, they live in rather isolated areas, but their purpose is what? Gathering their food, or talking to their loved ones, or what?
Making sure everybody in the family is happy and taken care of. We actually introduced the idea of assisted living. Do you have any of your relatives? And we actually had a difficult time just explaining the concept of an assisted living place. They had no idea what we were talking about.
They value older people.
They do, and they live with the family.
They don't just throw them out, so to speak.
They don't.
Wow, yeah. That's beautiful. Downshift routines daily to relieve stress. Do these people actually have stress in their lives?
Well, the ones that we talked to didn't seem to, but there may be that the ones that are the most successful at getting to these advanced ages are the people that have the least amount of stress. Now, we know from a lot of other work that a modest amount of stress can actually be beneficial for you. It turns on all kinds of processes in your body that helps repair your DNA, keeps your brain active, flushes things out of your brain. But too much stress, now I don't like to hear this as an academic, because we live on stress, but too much stress is clearly bad for you. And one of the things that I noticed from talking not just to these 100-year-olds, but others that I've talked to, is they don't seem to let things bother them in the long run. If you're 100 years old, most of the people that you were friends with have passed, right? Maybe even some of your children have passed, and they're sort of, okay, well, life goes on. And what am I going to do when I get up tomorrow? And I think this is where the family connections come in, because one of the things that I've noticed is that some people retire and they thrive, and some people retire and they wither. Yeah. And I think the difference is the people that thrive are the people that get up every day knowing, I want to do X. This is important.
I have a purpose.
Yep.
We mentioned earlier the 80% rule of eating. When your stomach's 80% full, push the plate away. It's okay. Smallest meal, they say, is late afternoon, early evening. They're not eating at 9 o'clock at night.
No.
No.
No. And this part of this is the rhythms that you come as farmers and shepherds. Because you do most
your day
of your
starts
work.
early.
Yep, and it ends early.
Plant slant diet. Beans are the cornerstone of their diets. As you mentioned earlier, very little meat.
Right, and you're getting their protein mostly from plant sources.
All right, wine at 5. 1 to 2 glasses a day, preferably red wine, preferably, I guess, that they make themselves,
Yes.
especially in Sardinia.
Yeah, so some of the people we asked them about this. Do you drink wine? And some of them didn't. The two ladies said they'd been teetotalers their whole lives, but some of them did.
Okay.
So it's one of these things, again, everything in moderation. There seems to be part of what's called the French paradox is that French drink a lot of wine, but yet the French are one of the longest lived groups of people in Europe. And so those of us who like wine, like myself, like to think of it as, oh yeah, there's got to be something healthy in there.
The red
but we
wine.
don't really know what it is.
And just a couple more here. They have faith-based services. Their loved ones first, as you mentioned a moment ago. They have social circles that they kind of keep. And so if we adopt this lifestyle, I guess there's still no guarantee we're going to live to be 100, but we're going to be well on our way, aren't we?
We are, and they seem to have discovered, probably by accident, just because of where they grew up, and all the secrets of staying healthy longer, and we've kind of forgotten those. I mean, our ancestors used to live more like that than we do, and so we need to recover that, and you combine that with all the advances of modern medicine. I mean, modern medicine is really important. It's saved many people's lives and will continue. If you take the best lifestyle and you combine it with the best of modern medicine, then you're talking about a really nicely long, healthy life.
Keep discovering those blue zones. Keep helping us work toward them. For Dr. Stephen Austad, I'm Pam Huff. Here's to living longer.